I still remember the sound of that night. It wasn't the clinking of silverware or the low hum of the TV in the background or even the chatter of the kids. It was the sound of water, cold water, splashing across my face in front of my whole family. That sound has stayed with me like a scar you can't wash away. Let me take you back. My name's Samuel Turner, 63 years old. I used to be a carpenter, the kind of man who spent his life building things, tables, chairs, cabinets, houses. My wife passed away a few years back, so now it's just me and my son's family, or at least that's what I thought. I believed we were one family under one roof, but sometimes blood isn't enough to make a family. That night we were all at the dinner table, me, my son Ethan, his wife Clara, and their 2 little kids. The table was full, the kind of meal most people would be grateful for. Roasted chicken, vegetables, steaming rice in a big bowl at the center. The smell of garlic and butter filled the room. Everyone was talking over each other, the kids tapping their spoons like they were playing drums, Clara trying to keep order. I sat there quietly, eating what was on my plate, waiting until everyone else had what they needed before I reached for more. That's how I was raised. That's how I lived my whole life. But after finishing my portion, I realized I was still hungry. My stomach wasn't full, and I thought to myself, what harm is there in asking for a little more rice? So I looked up and asked softly, could I have another spoonful, son? Just a simple request, the kind of thing any father should be able to ask without a second thought. The room froze. Ethan's face tightened like I just asked him to give me the world. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed, and without a word, without even a breath of hesitation, he grabbed his glass of water, leaned across the table, and hurled it into my face. The shock of it, the cold hitting my skin, the way it ran down my shirt, soaking into the fabric, it all happened so fast. My fork slipped out of my hand and clattered onto the plate. My heart stopped. I sat there, dripping, staring at him. For a moment, I thought it had to be some sick joke. Maybe he'd laugh, maybe he'd say, "Relax, Dad, I was just playing." But he didn't laugh. His face stayed hard, his lips pressed together like a man who wanted to prove a point. And then he muttered, "That's enough. Stop acting like a king in my house." Clara, my daughter-in-law, smirked and shook her head. "Don't bother my husband while he's eating," she said, her tone dripping with contempt. Her words stung almost as much as the water did. I looked to my grandchildren, hoping for some shred of innocence, some spark of love. Instead, I heard one of them giggle. Then the other copied me, slouching in their chair, pretending to groan the way I sometimes do when I sit down with my bad knees. They thought it was funny. They thought their grandpa was a joke. And in that instant, something inside me cracked. Do you know what it feels like when your entire identity is erased in a single moment? When the title you carried proudly, father, provider, protector, vanishes and you're left sitting there as nothing more than a burden. That's what it felt like. My heart didn't just hurt, it broke. Not from the water, but from the realization that my son, my only son, no longer saw me as a father at all. I didn't yell. I didn't slam my fists on the table. I didn't storm out. I just sat there, the water dripping down my chin, sliding onto my shirt, pooling on the floor. My hands trembled, but I kept them on my lap. I wiped my face with a napkin, trying to hold onto what little dignity I had left. The silence was deafening. Everyone else went back to eating, talking, laughing, like humiliating me was just another part of dinner, like it was entertainment. And I realized in that moment I wasn't just being ignored, I was being erased. The shame burned hotter than any anger I'd ever felt. And the worst part, it wasn't just Ethan's act. It was the way no one defended me. The way Clara's eyes sparkled with satisfaction. The way my grandkids laughed instead of asking if I was okay. That betrayal cut deeper than any knife. I thought about all the nights I had gone without food so Ethan could eat. I thought about selling my old watch to buy him his first bicycle. I thought about the hours I spent in the workshop making furniture just to pay his tuition, the calluses on my hands, the sweat that built the very roof over his head. And here I was, treated like a beggar asking for scraps. I stayed in that chair until the plates were cleared, my shirt still damp, my pride slipping away like the water that had been poured over me. Inside, I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. And yet, at the same time, something else began to stir, a flicker of resolve I hadn't felt in years. Because humiliation has a way of waking you up. It makes you see the truth that's been hiding in plain sight. And that night I saw it clearly. The man I had raised, the boy I had once carried on my shoulders, was gone. In his place was a stranger who thought he was king of a castle he didn't even build. I went to my room that night, shut the door behind me, and sat on the edge of the bed. My reflection in the mirror across the room stared back at me, wrinkled skin, tired eyes, hair gone gray. I barely recognized myself. I whispered under my breath, "Enough." It was the first time I had ever said it out loud. Enough of the disrespect. Enough of the silence. Enough of being invisible in a home that was supposed to be mine too. What happened at that dinner table wasn't just a moment of disrespect. It was a turning point, a line crossed that could never be uncrossed. And while Ethan thought he had broken me that night, the truth was, he had awakened something he would regret for the rest of his life. But that's a story I'll get to in time. For now, I just want you to sit with me in that moment. An old man dripping with water, staring at his family, realizing the people he sacrificed everything for no longer saw him as worthy of even a spoonful of rice. That's where my story begins. And if you've ever felt overlooked, humiliated, or unappreciated by the people you gave your all to, stick with me, because what came next wasn't just payback, it was justice. Quiet, final, undeniable justice. Before we go on, let me pause here and ask you something. If this story resonates with you, if it reminds you of your own father or maybe even yourself, take a second to hit that subscribe button. Not just to hear the rest of my journey, but to remind yourself that no matter how small someone tries to make you feel, there's always a way to rise again. I grew up knowing what it meant to be poor. Not the kind of poor where you skip going out to eat or settle for cheaper shoes. I mean the kind where your stomach growls so loud at night you can't sleep. The kind where you work before you even know what childhood is supposed to feel like. By the time I was 12, while most kids were still playing baseball in the yard, I was hauling bricks on construction sites, sweeping out dusty shops, carrying lumber on my back just to bring home a few dollars. Every blister on my hand meant food on the table. Every aching muscle meant one more day we could survive. I never thought about myself much back then. I didn't have dreams of fancy cars or big houses. My only thought was simple: make sure my family had enough. That became the rhythm of my life. When Ethan was born, that rhythm turned into a vow. I looked down at that tiny face in the hospital and whispered a promise to myself. He will never live the life I had to live. He will never go to bed hungry, never walk to school ashamed of his clothes, never feel like the world forgot him. From that day forward, every single thing I did was for him. I remember the first time I bought him a school uniform. Tuition had gone up that year and bills were piling on my table like a cruel joke. I didn't have enough, but I found a way. I skipped meals, an entire week of going without dinner, drinking water just to fill the empty space in my stomach. And when I finally walked into that shop and laid down the crumpled bills for his little white shirt and blue pants, I didn't feel weak. I felt strong. Because when I saw his smile, the way he twirled in front of the mirror, proud to look like the other kids, it was like my hunger disappeared. There were other sacrifices too, the kind nobody sees. Like the time he wanted a bicycle. I knew how badly he wanted it. He watched the neighbor kids race up and down the street, their laughter echoing through the summer air. He stood there barefoot, pretending not to care, but I saw the way his eyes followed them. So I took off the only nice thing I owned, the gold band from my wedding day. The one my wife slid onto my finger when she promised me forever. I sold it, walked into a pawn shop with tears in my eyes, walked out with cash in my pocket and bought that bike. When Ethan saw it, his face lit up like the 4th of July. He didn't know what it cost me, and I didn't tell him. Some sacrifices are better left unspoken. Years rolled on and the needs got bigger. Shoes, textbooks, summer programs, college tuition. I patched roofs in the blazing sun, drove trucks overnight and worked double shifts just to make sure Ethan never had to worry. Every time my body ached, I told myself it was worth it, because my son's future was being built on my broken back. And when he grew older, when he fell in love and said he wanted a wedding, I didn't hesitate. I opened my savings account, the one I'd been putting away for retirement, and I emptied it. Every dollar. Because I wanted his day to be grand, wanted his bride to feel like she was marrying into something honorable. I stood there in my old suit, watching him smile under the lights, and even though my pockets were empty, my heart was full. I thought, this is what it means to be a father, to give until you have nothing left and still find a way to give more. I can't forget one memory. Ethan was just a boy then, maybe 7 or 8. It was a rainy afternoon. The house smelled like wood because I'd been working in the shed all morning. He came running in, his hair wet, cheeks flushed from playing in the drizzle. He climbed right into my lap, wrapped his small arms around my neck and whispered, "Dad, when you're old, I'll protect you. I'll take care of you just like you take care of me." I laughed, ruffled his wet hair and told him, "That's all I'll ever need, son." Those words carved themselves into my heart. That little boy's promise carried me through every sacrifice. When my wife would worry that I was giving too much, when neighbors said I was spoiling him, I would shake my head and remember his words. I believed them. I believed that one day, when my back couldn't carry the load anymore, my son's shoulders would be strong enough to carry me. But promises made in childhood are fragile things. They don't always survive the weight of years or the poison of entitlement. And as I sit here now, remembering that rainy day, I can still feel the warmth of his small arms around me. It makes the coldness of his eyes at that dinner table, the night he threw water in my face, cut even deeper. Because I didn't just lose my dignity that night. I lost the boy who once swore he'd never let me fall. That's the part that breaks me the most. Not the years of sacrifice, not the hunger, not the empty savings account. It's that somewhere along the way, the little boy who promised to protect his father grew into a man who forgot what the word respect even meant. And that's why what came next had to happen. When Ethan started getting older, I began to notice little changes in him. At first, they seemed harmless, just small signs of a kid growing up with more than I ever had. He never had to go hungry, never had to wear shoes with holes in the soles, never had to wake up before sunrise to haul bricks for strangers. He grew up comfortable, maybe a little too comfortable. I wanted him to understand responsibility. I wanted him to feel proud of building something on his own. That's why I made what I thought was a smart decision. I opened a joint bank account with his name on it. I told myself it would be a teaching tool. I thought if he saw the numbers in black and white, if he understood how money flowed in and out, he'd respect it. He'd treat it as something earned, something sacred. But Ethan didn't see it that way. The moment he realized his name was on that account, something shifted. To him, it wasn't our account, it was his. He strutted around like he had just inherited the world. He'd swipe the card without hesitation, order gadgets online, pay for nights out with his friends, take trips he didn't even bother telling me about. He walked around with his chest puffed out, telling people he had it covered, when in truth every dollar still came from my years of labor. I remember one night, I overheard him on the phone bragging to his buddy about buying a set of rims for his car. He laughed, saying, "Man, I've got the money, no worries." And I just stood there in the hallway staring at my own hands that had built every cent of that so-called money. My hands with the veins and scars and calluses. His friends didn't know it was his father's sweat fueling those purchases. They only saw Ethan living large. I kept telling myself, he's young. He'll grow out of it. I thought maybe it was just a phase, maybe it was just what 20-somethings did. I tried to excuse it, thinking that one day he'd wake up, look at me, and realize where it all came from. I wanted to believe the good in him, the boy who once promised to take care of me. But the more I looked, the more I saw arrogance taking root. When I asked about saving, he'd wave me off with a smirk. "Don't worry, old man, I've got this." Old man, that's what he called me. He said it like a joke, but there was no respect behind it, just dismissal. I should have seen it for what it was, a warning. Instead, I bit my tongue. I thought patience would fix it. I thought time would teach him what I couldn't. But entitlement doesn't fade on its own. It grows, especially when it's fed. And I had been feeding it for years with every sacrifice, every dollar, every piece of my pride that I handed over without question. Sometimes I'd sit in my room at night and remember the boy who used to run to me after school, holding up a test paper with a big red A on it, waiting for me to smile. That boy had vanished. In his place stood a man who thought my sacrifices were nothing more than his birthright. It hurt, but I told myself to hold on, to give him time, because that's what fathers do. They hope. Even when the signs are flashing red, even when the truth is staring them in the face, fathers hope. And that hope, my hope, was the very thing that blinded me to what was coming next. It didn't happen all at once. Respect doesn't disappear in a single day, it erodes piece by piece, until you wake up one morning and realize there's nothing left. At first, it was just the way Ethan talked to me. Short, clipped sentences, no warmth in his tone. I'd try to tell him a story from my younger years about the jobs I worked or the things I learned the hard way, and he'd cut me off with a sigh. "Stop living in the past." He'd snap, like my life before him didn't matter. Like all those years of struggle, all those sacrifices, were just some boring bedtime story he didn't want to hear. I brushed it off, telling myself he was stressed, busy, tired. But deep down, I felt the sting. Because when your own child looks at you like you're irrelevant, it cuts in a place no one else can reach. Then came the complaints. He started keeping track of every bite I ate, every pill I needed, as if my existence was draining him. "Do you really need to eat that much rice?" He'd mutter, rolling his eyes, or he'd hold up my prescriptions and shake his head. "Dad, you're costing me more than my kids." Imagine hearing that from the boy you once starved yourself for, from the boy you stayed hungry so he could eat. Every word was like a knife, carving away at whatever pride I had left. Clara, his wife, didn't make things any better. If anything, she added fuel to the fire. One evening, when Ethan was grumbling about bills, she looked right at me and said, "Maybe it's time for you to think about a nursing home. Old folks shouldn't make their kids carry the load forever." She said it casually, like she was talking about the weather, but I heard the truth in her voice. I wasn't wanted there. Not as a father, not as family, just an obligation. What broke me wasn't just their words, but the way their children, the little ones I thought might still see me with innocent eyes, started to follow their lead. They copied Ethan's tone, rolling their eyes at me, ignoring me when I asked them simple questions. And one afternoon, as I slowly lowered myself into a chair, my knees popping the way they do now, I heard my grandson groan loudly, mocking me. His sister burst out laughing. I froze. For a second, I didn't know whether to cry or pretend it didn't matter. But inside, I was shattered. Because that's how it spreads. Disrespect is contagious. Kids watch, they learn, and they repeat. And I realized my own grandchildren were being taught to see me as a joke, as less than human. That night I went to my room and shut the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, head in my hands, the weight of it all pressing down on me. The house was quiet, but inside my chest it felt like a storm. I thought of my wife, the woman who had always believed in me, the one who'd once held my hand and whispered, "Don't let anyone make you small, Sam. Not the world, not the neighbors, not even your own children. Promise me that." Her voice came back to me in that silence, like an echo from another life. I could almost see her face in the shadows of the room, her smile soft but firm, reminding me of the man I used to be. And for the first time in years I cried. Not the quiet tears you wipe away before anyone notices, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shook my whole body. I pressed my palms against my face to hide it, even though no one was there to see. I wept for the boy I'd raised, for the man he had become, and for the husband she no longer had to lean on. I wept because I had promised her I would be strong, and here I was, broken, humiliated, treated like nothing. But in those tears, her voice stayed with me. Don't let anyone make you small. And though I didn't know it yet, that memory, that promise, would be the thing that kept me standing. Because respect may crumble, dignity may be stripped away, but the words of the one person who truly loved me, they don't fade. They live on even when everything else is gone. Dinner that night should have been ordinary. Just rice, vegetables, the clinking of silverware. But instead, it became the moment everything broke. I remember sitting there, waiting my turn like I always did, letting everyone else take what they wanted first. When the bowls finally reached me, I took just enough to get by. My appetite isn't what it used to be, but that night when my plate was empty, I felt a small pang of hunger. So I lifted my head and asked softly, "Could I have a little more rice?" It was such a simple request, but the room froze. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He didn't say a word. He just grabbed his glass of cold water and without hesitation hurled it straight into my face. The shock of it, icy water splashing over my skin, soaking through my shirt, was nothing compared to the silence that followed. The rice I'd been eating slid off my plate, clumped and wet, scattered across the table. I sat there dripping, stunned, while my son went back to his food as if nothing had happened. Clara smirked, shaking her head like I was the one who had embarrassed her. And the kids, God help me, the kids snickered under their breath, whispering, mocking me as if their grandfather's humiliation was just another form of entertainment. That laughter was louder than the splash of water, louder than the sound of my shirt clinging to my chest, louder than the pounding in my ears. It was the sound of respect dying. I stayed still. I didn't yell. I didn't slam my fists on the table. I sat there frozen, telling myself not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. But inside, something cracked. A man can carry a lot, years of labor, pain, hunger, but the weight of open humiliation from your own flesh and blood, that's the one burden that splinters the soul. Later that night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. Water still clung to my hair, my shirt still damp against my skin. I looked up and saw a stranger staring back at me. His eyes were red not from age but from swallowing down tears that refused to fall. His lips were pressed so tightly shut they almost disappeared. His face, lined with decades of sacrifice, looked empty. And in that silence I whispered 2 words to the man in the glass. Enough, enough. That was the moment patience turned into resolve. That was the moment I knew silence would no longer mean surrender. It would become my weapon. You see, a father's love is deep, but it is not infinite. And when it's trampled on, when it's mocked at the dinner table in front of grandchildren who laugh at his pain, that love transforms into something else, something sharper, something unstoppable. If you're watching this right now, I need you to hear me. Call your parents tonight. Don't wait for tomorrow. Don't assume they'll always be there, sitting quietly in the corner, swallowing every hurt. Because one day you'll realize it's too late to say thank you, too late to say I love you, too late to show the respect they always deserved. And when that day comes, the silence they leave behind will haunt you in ways you can't imagine. So pick up the phone, knock on their door, say the words while you still can, before the rice runs out, before the water spills, before enough becomes enough. That night, after the water, after the silence, I sat alone in my room with papers spread out in front of me. Old folders I'd kept tucked away for years, the kind of paperwork most people forget about once life feels stable. Deeds, bank statements, investment documents. I flipped through each page slowly, almost like I was seeing them for the first time. And that's when the truth settled over me like a quiet storm. Every single thing Ethan thought was his, every piece of security he flaunted, was still in my name. The house, mine, paid for with decades of sweat on construction sites with bones that still ache when the weather changes. The land out back, signed under my hand, the accounts he treated like his playground, legally tied to me. He had access, sure, but no ownership. The power had never left my hands. I had only been too blind, too trusting to use it. I remembered the day at the bank years ago when I first put his name alongside mine. He was just a young man then, freshly married, full of plans and promises. I wanted him to feel included, to take pride in managing what we had built. The bank manager slid the forms across the desk, looked me dead in the eye, and asked, "Are you certain you want this, Mr. Turner? Once his name is here, he'll have access too." And I, with the kind of faith only a father can have, smiled and said, "Yes, he's my son. I trust him." I can still hear my voice, steady but naive. The manager hesitated, then stamped the papers, and just like that, Ethan's name was written beside mine. Back then, I thought it was a gift. Now I see it was a test, one my son failed in the worst way. Because the truth was simple, he never owned any of it. Not the roof over his head, not the money in his hand, not even the future he boasted about. He was a guest in a kingdom he didn't build. And he had mistaken my generosity for surrender. I sat back in my chair, the documents spread out like weapons no one knew I carried, and I realized something. I wasn't powerless. I had never been powerless. He only believed I was because I let him, because I chose silence over confrontation. But silence doesn't mean defeat, it can mean preparation. I thought of my wife's words again, that quiet warning she gave me years ago. Don't let anyone, not even your own child, make you small. At the time, I laughed it off. How could my own son ever see me as less? But now I understood. She had seen further than I did. She knew entitlement when it was only a seed. And now that seed had grown into a tree choking the life out of me. But what Ethan didn't realize was that I still held the axe. I whispered it out loud to no one but myself. Justice will come, not with shouting, not with fists, but with silence. The decision settled in me like stone. For years, I thought patience was the answer. For years, I carried humiliation, thinking that endurance was strength. But strength is knowing when to stop carrying. Strength is knowing when to act. And I was ready. He thought pouring water on my face stripped me of dignity. He thought mocking me at the table proved I was nothing. But he forgot something far more important than respect. He forgot the law, the names on those papers, the truth etched in ink. I closed the folder carefully, slid the documents back into place and locked them away. Tomorrow they wouldn't just be papers. Tomorrow they'd be the end of his illusion. The next morning I woke up with a strange calm in my chest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man waiting for the next insult. I felt like a man with a plan. I ironed a clean shirt, combed my hair back, and walked out the door like it was just another ordinary day. But inside, I knew, by the time the sun set, nothing about our lives would be ordinary again. At the bank, the air smelled faintly of ink and polished floors. The manager, a man who had known me for decades, shook my hand with quiet respect. He didn't rush me, didn't pry. He just brought out the forms I'd asked for and slid them across the desk. I held the pen, steady now, not shaking like the night before. Page after page, signature after signature, I erased Ethan's illusion of power. Every dollar, every cent, every account was transferred into my name alone. His access revoked, his cards canceled, his control stripped away with the stroke of my hand. When the manager looked at me and said, "It's all done, sir," I nodded, a small smile touching my lips. It wasn't joy, not exactly. It was relief. The weight I'd carried for so long, the humiliation, the silence, it all shifted into something stronger. For the first time in years, I wasn't the powerless father in the corner. I was the man holding every card. That evening, I came home and sat at the dinner table like nothing had changed. Ethan laughed with Clara, the kids fought over spoons, the television hummed in the background. He didn't even look at me. He had no idea his world had already collapsed. I ate quietly, spooning rice into my mouth, keeping my face calm. Inside, I thought, if only you knew, son. If only you knew that while you mock me tonight, your tomorrow has already been erased. Later, when the house went still and their laughter faded into snores behind closed doors, I began to pack. I opened my closet, pulled out my old suitcase, the same one I used to carry tools when I traveled for work, and began folding shirts with slow, careful hands. Socks, pants, my medicines, my documents, nothing more than I could carry. I wasn't running away with things. I was leaving with dignity. I paused, looking around the room one last time. This was the space where I had hoped to spend my last years surrounded by love. But it hadn't been a home for a long time. It was a cell. A place where every glance and word reminded me that I was unwanted. I whispered into the emptiness, "This isn't home anymore. It's just a prison, and I'm done being your prisoner." Then I pulled out my old wallet and the note I had written earlier. On it was the booking confirmation for a one-way ticket, Portugal. A coastal town my wife once dreamed of visiting, a place she used to describe with a soft smile whenever we'd see pictures of its cliffs and sea. Maybe someday, she'd whisper. That someday never came for her, but it would come for me. And when I walked those beaches, I'd carry her memory with every step. I sat on the bed, suitcase at my feet, the glow of the booking confirmation lighting up my phone. For the first time in so long, I felt peace creep back into my bones. Not revenge, not anger, peace. Tomorrow, my son would wake up to a life stripped bare. But me, I would wake up closer to freedom than I'd ever been. Sometimes the loudest strike is silence, and mine had already begun. And if this story means something to you, if you've ever looked at your parents and forgotten how much they gave, don't wait for silence to remind you. Call them today. Tell them thank you. Tell them you see them before it's too late. And if you want more stories like this, real stories that make you feel, make you think, don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss what's next. The next morning came like any other, but for Ethan, the world had already begun to crumble. He shuffled into the kitchen with his phone in one hand, sipping his coffee with the other. Clara sat across from him, flipping through bills with a sharp eye. He logged into his account as he always did, ready to brag about numbers that weren't his. Only this time there were no numbers. Just zeros staring back at him like cold eyes. He frowned, tapped the screen harder, refreshed it, cursed under his breath. Nothing. His empire had evaporated overnight. "What's wrong?" Clara asked without looking up. He waved her off, tried another account, another card, declined. Error. Frozen. He tried again and again, the panic rising in his voice. Finally, Clara looked up. "What's going on, Ethan?" He stammered. It's a mistake. It has to be a mistake." But when he called the bank, the calm voice on the other end confirmed what he didn't want to hear. "Your access has been revoked. The accounts are no longer under your control." Clara's face hardened as the truth spilled out in broken words. She slammed the stack of bills onto the table. "You told me we were secure. You told me this was our money. What have you done?" Her eyes burned with betrayal. Words spread faster than fire in dry grass. Neighbors whispered at their fences, friends didn't return his calls, and those who did laughed behind his back. "That's the guy," they said. "The one who mocked his own father, thought he was a king, now he's a beggar." The humiliation that Ethan had once served so freely to me now came back to him tenfold. He went door to door, begging for loans, only to be turned away. His so-called friends smirked, some even asked, "Didn't your dad build all that for you?" Guess he finally took it back. One evening, as the weight of it all crushed him, there was a knock on the door. He opened it to find a lawyer standing tall, envelope in hand. "From your father," the man said simply. Ethan's hands trembled as he tore it open. Inside, just one line written in my own hand. "You threw water on my face. I washed away your empire." No signature, no return address, just finality. Ethan sank into the couch, staring at the words. Clara turned away from him. The children stood in the doorway, wide-eyed, seeing their father not as a provider but as a liar. Their silence was heavier than any insult, and while his world collapsed, mine began anew. I stepped off a plane in Lisbon, the sea breeze rushing into my lungs like medicine I'd been denied for too long. My silver hair whipped in the wind as I walked along the waterfront, a warm coffee in my hand, the sound of waves crashing against the old stone walls. I closed my eyes and whispered, "We made it, darling. You always dreamed of the sea, and here we are. I found our peace." Every step along that shore was healing. Every sip of coffee was freedom. No one mocked me there. No one called me a burden. For the first time in decades, I felt like myself again, not a servant, not a shadow, but a man. And I understood then, when a child forgets respect, when arrogance replaces gratitude, blessings wither away. A family without honor cannot stand. Parents are the foundation, and when the foundation is destroyed, the whole house comes crashing down. That was Ethan's downfall, and it was my freedom. If you're hearing this now, take it as more than a story. Take it as a reminder. If your parents are still alive, don't wait for regret to teach you what gratitude could have told you today. Call them. Visit them. Say thank you for the meals, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights they gave you without complaint. Respect is free, but once lost, it can cost you everything. And if this story touched you, share it. Let someone else be reminded before it's too late. Like this video, subscribe for more, and help spread these lessons that are bigger than any fortune. Because sometimes the smallest word, thank you, is worth more than millions.